It began on a night so cold that even the streetlights seemed to shiver. Snow fell in thick sheets across the quiet town of Fairview, blanketing everything in white silence. Most people were warm inside their homes, fires crackling, windows glowing, and laughter drifting from living rooms where families gathered for the evening. But not everyone had such comfort. On the far side of town, near the old train station, a single father named Michael Turner was driving home from a long day at the auto shop, his hands rough from work, his mind heavy with thoughts of bills, groceries, and the son waiting for him at home. He had been living this routine for years: wake up before dawn, fix cars until dusk, pick up his 10-year-old son Ethan from school, and fall asleep exhausted. Life was steady but lonely. Since losing his wife to illness, Michael's world had been smaller, quieter, and often painfully empty. He was doing his best, but every day felt like walking uphill with the wind in his face. That night, something unusual caught his attention. As he passed the dim alley behind the train station, he saw a flicker of movement, a small shadow shifting against the snow. At first, he thought it was a stray cat, but then he heard a sound that stopped his heart. It wasn't a meow. It was crying. He parked the truck and stepped out, his boots crunching in the snow. The sound grew louder as he moved closer, and when he turned the corner, what he saw made him freeze in place. Two little girls, huddled together under a torn blanket, their faces pale and streaked with tears, shivering violently in the freezing air. One of them had a bandage tied crudely around her leg, already soaked through, and the other was whispering softly, trying to keep her sister awake. Michael knelt beside them immediately, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around both children. Hey, you're okay now," he said, his voice breaking. The smaller one clung to him as if afraid he would vanish. Their fingers were ice cold, their lips trembling too much to form words. Without another thought, he lifted them into his arms and carried them to his truck, cranking the heater up as high as it would go. The older girl, her voice faint and broken, tried to explain that they had nowhere to go, that no one wanted them. But soon she fell silent, her head resting against his shoulder. When they reached his house, Ethan met him at the door, wide-eyed and confused. "Dad, who are they?" he asked, but Michael just shook his head. "They're cold and hungry, son. That's all that matters tonight." He made up a bed on the couch with blankets, brought out warm soup, and watched as the two girls ate with desperate hunger. Their names, they told him later, were Sophie and Sarah. They were twins, though not identical. Sophie had brown hair and serious blue eyes, while Sarah was smaller, with light curls and a shy smile that flickered through her fear. That night, after the girls fell asleep by the heater, Michael sat at the kitchen table staring at the old photo of his wife that still hung on the wall. He wondered what she would have said about all this. He could almost hear her voice, calm and gentle, telling him he had done the right thing. "You always had a soft heart, Mike," she used to say. "Don't ever lose that." The next morning, he called the authorities. It was the responsible thing to do. Social services arrived that afternoon, two polite women with clipboards and sympathetic eyes. They listened as Michael explained how he'd found the twins, nodding as they took notes. The girls sat quietly on the couch, clutching each other's hands. When the social worker stood and said it was time to go, both children began to cry. Sophie wrapped her arms around Michael's leg, refusing to let go. "Please," she begged through tears, "don't let them take us away again." Michael's heart cracked open. He had seen a lot of pain in his life, but nothing like that. The look in Sophie's eyes was not the fear of a child misbehaving, it was the kind of fear that came from being hurt and forgotten too many times. He knelt down and said softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll make sure you're safe." Then he turned to the social worker. "If you need someone to keep them until you find a place, they can stay here. I've got space." The woman hesitated, clearly surprised. Single men weren't usually the ones volunteering to foster children, especially not two at once, especially not with disabilities. But there was something about the sincerity in his voice that made her pause. She nodded and said they would start the paperwork, and just like that, Michael Turner became the foster father to two little girls who had already endured more than most adults. The first weeks were difficult. Sophie's leg required medical attention, and Sarah's partial hearing loss made communication a challenge. But none of it mattered to Michael. He fixed what he could, learned what he didn't know, and loved them both as fiercely as if they had always been his own. Ethan, too, began to bond with them quickly. At first, he didn't understand why his dad had taken in strangers. But one night, he overheard Sarah whispering to Sophie before bed, "We're not cold anymore." That was all it took. Ethan started calling them his sisters. Michael never asked too many questions about where they came from. The report said they'd been in foster care after being found near an abandoned home years ago, but no one knew much beyond that. He figured what mattered now wasn't where they came from, but where they were going. He focused on giving them what every child deserved: safety, warmth, and love. Every morning began early. He'd wake the kids, make breakfast, and help Sophie put on her leg brace before driving them all to school. In the evenings, he worked on car repairs from home to make a little extra money, while the children did their homework around the kitchen table. Sometimes he'd catch them laughing together and feel something stir inside him, a kind of peace he hadn't felt since before his wife died. The town noticed too. Neighbors waved more often now, sometimes dropping off old clothes or baked goods for the children. The Turners, once just a quiet father and son, had become something brighter, a symbol of hope in a place that had grown used to hardship. Michael didn't think of himself as a hero. He was just doing what felt right. What he didn't know, and what no one could have guessed, was that one of those little girls carried a secret that would change everything. Somewhere far away, in a mansion filled with grief and unanswered questions, a wealthy couple was still searching for their missing daughter, a child lost to tragedy and circumstance years earlier. And while Michael tucked the twins into bed each night, humming softly until they drifted to sleep, the threads of fate were quietly pulling two worlds together. The man who had thought he was saving two forgotten children was about to discover that one of them was the key to a story far larger than his own, a story of loss, love, and the unexpected miracles that begin when someone chooses kindness without expecting anything in return. Months turned into years, and the Turner home became a place of laughter, scraped knees, and bedtime stories instead of loneliness. Michael, the once quiet and overworked single father, now found his days filled with the chatter of three children who called him Dad. Sophie had grown taller and stronger despite her brace, while Sarah had learned to communicate more clearly with the help of a hearing aid and a gentle teacher who saw her potential. The girls thrived under Michael's care, and even the neighbors often said they'd never seen children bloom so beautifully. What began as an act of compassion had transformed into a bond that felt unbreakable. Michael never treated the girls as guests or burdens. They were his daughters, through and through. He celebrated their birthdays, attended their school recitals, and worked extra shifts to make sure they had everything they needed. Ethan adored them, often calling himself their big brother protector. The little family that had once been broken by loss now carried a quiet strength that drew people in. But behind all the happiness, there were still questions Michael sometimes asked himself in the dark. Who were the girls before that night? Why had no one come looking for them? The authorities had told him their background was murky, that there were no records matching their names or faces in the system, and that sometimes abandoned children simply vanished into bureaucracy. He'd chosen not to push further. Love had been enough. One chilly morning, when the children were at school, Michael received a call from a local charity event organizer. They were looking for families who had adopted or fostered children to speak about their experiences, and Michael's story had spread through the community as one of hope. Hesitant at first, he agreed. When the day of the event came, he brought Sophie, Sarah, and Ethan along, dressed neatly and proud. It was a small gathering at a hotel ballroom, filled with families, reporters, and business sponsors. Among them was a man who had been living with quiet sorrow for years, David Reynolds, a millionaire CEO and philanthropist known for funding children's hospitals and missing persons programs. He had lost his own daughter years ago, a tragedy that had reshaped his entire life. She had been taken during a trip abroad with her mother, and despite endless searches, detectives, and media coverage, she had never been found. The pain had never left him. His wife, unable to bear the grief, had passed away shortly after. The loss of their little girl, only 4 years old at the time, had left an emptiness that no amount of money or success could fill. When Michael stepped on stage to speak, David was only half listening. But as he began describing the night, he found two little girls huddled under a blanket. Something in the CEO's heart began to stir. He couldn't explain it, but the story struck him deeply. Then, when the girls were called up to join their father, the entire room fell silent. Sophie's bright blue eyes caught the light, her shy but confident smile radiating innocence. David's breath caught in his throat. Those eyes, they were the same as his late wife's. He felt his chest tighten. Could it be? No, it was impossible. And yet the resemblance was undeniable. After the event, David approached Michael, introducing himself politely and praising his kindness. He asked about the girl's past, and Michael repeated the little he knew. Something in David's expression shifted, a mix of hope and disbelief. That night, he couldn't sleep. The thought of that girl haunted him. The next day, he made discreet inquiries through his private investigators, using the minimal information Michael had shared. Weeks passed before the results came back, but when they did, the revelation hit like a storm. One of the twins, Sarah, matched the DNA record of his missing daughter. The discovery was both miraculous and devastating. Years of searching, praying, and mourning had led to this moment, but it was tangled in questions of morality and love. David could have gone straight to the authorities and claimed his daughter. Legally, he had every right to do so. But something stopped him. He had seen the way Michael looked at the children, the protective warmth in his eyes, the bond that could only be formed through years of love and sacrifice. How could he take that away from them? Still, he knew he couldn't stay silent forever. He arranged a meeting with Michael, explaining who he was and revealing what the investigation had uncovered. Michael listened in stunned silence, struggling to process the words. His world felt as though it was tilting. He looked toward the girls playing in the yard, blissfully unaware, and felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had raised them, healed them, and given them safety when no one else had. And now one of them, by some twist of fate, was the lost daughter of a man who had everything. David's voice trembled as he spoke. He didn't demand custody or make threats. Instead, he said softly, "You gave her life again. For that, I can never repay you." He explained how he had spent years searching, how he had almost given up, and how finding Sarah felt like getting a piece of his heart back. Then, with surprising humility, he asked Michael if they could find a way to share her life, so that she would never have to lose either of her fathers. It wasn't an easy conversation. Michael's emotions ran deep: fear, sadness, gratitude, even anger at the universe for forcing such a choice on him. But as he looked at David's tearful eyes, he saw the reflection of a pain he understood too well, the pain of losing family. In the following months, the two men built an unlikely friendship. They began spending time together, blending two worlds that had once been miles apart. David invited the whole Turner family to visit his estate, where the children ran through sprawling gardens and played with laughter echoing off marble walls. Sophie and Sarah adjusted surprisingly well, sensing the love that connected both men. Slowly, the truth was shared with the girls in a way that was gentle and honest. Sarah didn't fully understand at first, but when she finally did, she clung to both of her fathers and whispered, "I don't want to lose either of you." Michael and David promised she never would. Their arrangement wasn't about money or legal rights, it was about love, compassion, and gratitude. David helped support the Turner family quietly, ensuring the children would have every opportunity in life. Michael continued to raise them as his own, and the connection between all of them deepened over time. The small-town mechanic and the billionaire philanthropist became family through shared heartbreak and grace. What began as an act of kindness on a snowy night had turned into something extraordinary. A single father's compassion had not only saved two abandoned children but had unknowingly restored a broken family that wealth alone could never mend. The story became one of quiet miracles, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in riches or power, but in the simple, selfless moments when someone chooses to love without question. And in that love, both men found redemption, the mechanic who found purpose again, and the millionaire who found the daughter he had thought lost forever.